So is the laundry done?
Yep, check.
Towels folded?
Yep.
Shirts pressed?
Yep.
Groceries bought?
Yep.
Dinner prepared?
Yep.
Paramania radio turned on? Well?
Uh-oh.
Don't let this happen to you. Paramania's here. Join us at paramaniaradio.com.
In the mall, during church. Do you have trouble keeping your pants on? Do you crave that glorious feeling of escaping the confines of leg tubes and butt barricades? There is a place you can go. Welcome to the No Pants Zone, the first Friday night of every month at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, only on Paramania Radio. The No Pants Zone. Freedom, oh sweet freedom.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Paramania, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
You are listening to Paramania Radio.
Hi, welcome to Voices of Spirit. It's Leo Bonomo on Paramania Radio. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you happen to be in the world. Very, very warm welcome. We may be having a break or two slightly longer tonight because, as you may hear, the voice is going. It's something that I tend to have, so I do apologise for that. So if I'm croaking, I do apologise, and if I am, do ask for some healing for me. Also, you might like to look at my book Summerland, which you can buy on Amazon. You can get that all over the world, and you might want to look at my site if you want a reading. So that would be www.leo, Bonomo, BON for Norman, OM for Mother, O.com. And you can get through to me there for readings on Skype, FaceTime, mobile, landline, lots of different ways. You can also Skype me as well. So if you're interested in a reading, that would be wonderful. If you need some encouragement, maybe to think about the standard, which hopefully you can hear. So I'll be doing some live readings tonight. But if you want to, if you can get in touch with the UK and look on yale.com, you can also see that there are lots of reviews there, as there are on my site. So if that's something that takes your interest, if you dial from the United States, I know that you have to change server in some way, so can be done. But if you're in the UK, do have a look at the Yale.com site. Tonight we'll be talking about some of the aspects and techniques of communication with spirit. So if you have any questions on how and why, and whether you should develop, and any general questions on development, then that is what we're doing tonight. I think for a lot of people there is quite a mystery or a misconception of how mediumship works, and some people, some psychics, will kind of overcomplicate what goes on. And it's common in trades. If you talk to an electrician, he'll give you it will dazzle. Some of them will dazzle you with science about how this works and how that works and why they charge so much money. Some mediums do, of course, charge a lot. Some do to put you off because they are so overworked, and they start adjusting their price for that. But generally speaking, if you're being asked to pay an awful lot for a medium, it's not generally the case in mediumship that the more you pay, the better you get. So that's something to look out for. So you can find prices and that on my site, and if you want to make a booking. Now, there's a lot of mysticism, no pun intended, about how mediumship works, and some people will try and make it, as I was just referring, as complicated as possible, and that there are very few with the true gift. I would tend to say that there are lots of people out there that are gifted. Some are exceptionally gifted, and we are all psychic. Everybody's psychic. It's a part of our animal instinct, if you want to call it that gut reaction, that gut sense. And you will find that that's quite a common reference. Psychism, etc., is denounced by skeptics, of course, but I'm sure we're all very well aware of the policeman's nose or the policeman's gut instinct as to when something does or doesn't feel right. Some of that, of course, comes down to training. Some of that is basic instinct, and some of that is experience. And you can apply all those things to being psychic. So we're all psychic. Sometimes ladies, men as well, will refer to it as female intuition, but men have that intuition as well. And the reason that women are more sensitive, or appear to be more sensitive, or it's not exclusively a woman's thing, but majorly a woman's thing, is because women are very open to their emotions, very open to their senses, and part of being a woman, from my understanding of it, because obviously I'm not even halfway there, if I don't offend anyone, is that they are taught from childhood to feel and to sense. And essentially what you do as you begin to develop, you start to feel and sense, if you're a man, in a slightly different way to that which you are accustomed. And you will find that there are a lot of mediums, both men and women, who are gay, and you could say that that's because there is a much more even amount, 50-50 of each, residing within that person, and so they are able to make contact, or their sensitivity is increased in that way. I would certainly say that around 90% of men that are mediums are gay, so in that sense I'm quite a rarity. Not exceptionally rare, but so there are different ways of working. So women tend to be very open about their emotions, their feelings, and they use their senses because from a woman's point of view, it's okay, in fact encouraged, to have female intuition. Men are not brought up like that generally, although of course it has changed a lot in the last few decades, but men are taught to be more manly, don't show your emotions, be aggressive, be a man, go out and butcher a deer so that you can bring it home and feed the family. So men and women used to be brought up so very different, and that's where we get that book from. Men are from what's it called? Women are from Venus, men are from Mars. I think I've got that the right way around. Do correct me if I'm wrong. So there's been an expectation of the two halves, men and women being brought up in two completely different ways. But spiritually, it doesn't matter really what body we inhabit, whether it's male or female, or is quite common now, transgender, mixed gender, whatever you want to call it. So one of the reasons that these aspects of us as human beings is more common now is because there is a mixing of this effect. And part of that is to increase the sensitivity. And we've talked many times about 2012 and that shift, that big shift in vibration, which is, of course, continuing. So that's opened and that's brought out a lot more of the sensitivities of people, and as people begin to talk about that more, and psychism and mediumship is much more accepted, then we grow up in a slightly different environment of certainly for men, of psychism, and being psychic is more acceptable now. It's not a woman's thing as years ago and hidden away. So there are lots of different reasons why it's more prominent now. It is a spiritual thing. It is a growing thing, and that's wonderful. So we're all psychic to a degree. There are those women as well, of course, that are skeptic and deny and suppress the thing. So if we start from the standpoint that we're all psychic, we're all sensitive, and we can increase that sensitivity, it's learning like anything else, then we can begin to increase that sensitivity and understand life in a different way. Now, there are times, of course, when quite naturally a gut instinct or reaction, sometimes often under great stress, rises to the surface, and we get premonitions, we get a gut feeling about something that's going to happen, whether that's good or bad. You know, people have a real good gut feeling about winning the lottery, for example, which proves to be correct. Lots of people tend to dwell on that aspect and think, well, you know, if it's a gut feeling like that, it's got to be bad. That's not necessarily so. But because these things are brought to the surface, often under great stress, then that is something that we tend to be wary of. And it's also one of the reasons, I think, that people view psychism, mysticism, mediumship with a slight dread. That, you know, connected to it is the fact that something bad's going to happen, and that's what I'm going to see. You'd be quite surprised at how many people will call or speak to a psychic, myself included, and say, oh, you're not going to tell me anything bad, are you? I don't want to hear anything bad. And again, it's that link with it comes up in certain circumstances, etc. Now, I will say, and again, I've said many times, a good medium will not tell you anything bad. There are exceptions, of course, to every rule. Legally, we're not supposed to tell you anything like that. But if I'm talking to a person and I know they're very open, I do read for a lot of mediums as well, and they will sometimes say, look, you know, this situation's going on with my grandfather, uncle, mum, whatever it might be. And so there is an understanding there between mediums and people that are very sensitive that, you know, something's not right. And so the medium's job at that point, as always, is to very delicately and diplomatically, sensibly, and with common sense, explain the situation that they're seeing. And for us, it's very much of kind of fingertip connection with it, sensing as we're giving word by word how the other person's taking it. So there is a good deal of common sense involved in that. Those tend to be extreme situations, as I say, with people who are quite open, not frightened, are aware, have a sense themselves, and are generally fairly sensitive. So those would be exceptions. But other than that, we do not give bad news. A sign of a good medium is to always leave a customer upbeat. And there's no reason why we can't do that. You know, sometimes news about work is not good, it's going wrong, and you can say, well, actually, you know, you either need to jump ship, Or if you put up with this, it's just going to lead to more of what you're getting. But the essence of that would be for the medium, and the medium as a job is to try and look forward and find out how that can be sorted. So yes, the job may be going downhill fast. That's going to bring all kinds of complications, but we can say, well, look, this period is going to be tough. We can go forward a little bit. This is going to get sorted out. And that's not there to assuage anything. It's not there to just make them feel good. It's what's going to happen. So there's that aspect to it as well. In a moment, we're going to go into a break. And if you have any questions, you can get us on 919-295-0150. You can also get us on Skype. You can join us in the chat room, or you can find us on Facebook. So if you have any questions about whether you should develop, aspects of development, any of those questions, or you want a live reading, then do get back to us, and we shall be most honoured to answer any questions that you have. So after the break, we're going to be talking about some of the techniques and the ways that spirit communicate with us. So we're going to be talking about that, and we'll be straight back with you after this.
Do you like ghost stories? Want to hear about some of the haunted homes and locations that I've investigated? Tune in for the latest in paranormal news and guest interviews with me, Mr. Haunted, on the Haunted Chronicles, Friday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, only on the Paramania Radio Network.
Hi, this is Alan Cox from Musical Memories on the Paramania Radio Network. Come and join me every Friday, 11 p.m. UK time at 6 p.m. Eastern for an hour of great music from down the decades.
You are listening to Paramania Radio.
Welcome to the all-new Paramania Radio.
Don't go by the book. Think like a pirate.
Hi, welcome back. So we're talking about some of the aspects and techniques of communication from spirit. Now, you would think if somebody from spirit was communicating with us and we had clairaudience, clear hearing, that the basic thing to do is just talk to us. And for me, clairaudience is the most powerful, because if it is just a matter of listening to what the person in spirit's saying and repeating it or regurgitating it, that's fairly easy. What you have to understand is that spirit have to come quite a long way down. So they have to come down maybe 8/10, maybe more. And what a medium does, even good ones, is try and come up that 1.5%, maybe 2%. So there is literally a meeting of minds. And if you can do that and you're highly, highly clairvoyant, it is just a matter of repeating what you've got. The fact is that the spirit mind and our minds, when we eventually return to spirit, works at least 100 times faster. So this is what's meant by them coming down this 8/10 or so, because they have to slow their mind down so much it is literally mind numbing. So it is something that they have to get used to. And we've seen examples in live readings that I've done, but also in explanations of how when they come close to Earth, they start to relive the Earth conditions, more specifically of when they passed over or around that time. And if you do that and you're not used to it, you suddenly find yourself from this very, very light spiritual body in the freedom and happiness in Summerland to conditions closely matching Earth and any physical or mental conditions that you had before you passed. So as you descend, if you like, into that fog, you put on this big heavy overcoat of who you were. Part of that process is the slowing down of the mind to come closer to that much heavier conditions of Earth. But when you do that and you're not used to it, you find yourself becoming you with those physical and mental conditions. So that's one thing that a soul trying to communicate for the first time has to tackle with. That confusion that can sometimes arise. You hear many mediums saying, including myself, you know, there was confusion at the end. It could have been Alzheimer's a couple of months before, or sharp as a pin, but 10 minutes towards the end, gobbledygook, garbled speech, stroke-like symptoms, whatever it might be. And that is us expressing what was physically happening to that person at the time. So they bring that with them. They wouldn't necessarily tell you, my mind's foggy, it slowed down. You could get that from them being there, as you could if you were talking to someone here in a similar condition. So you'd pick a lot of that up. The fact that even though they slow their minds down an awful lot, they come a long way down, that 8/10, their mind is still much, much quicker than ours. And so if you can imagine a tape recording that is speeded up an awful lot, it takes a lot of work to try and connect with and understand that scroll. So if you just imagine a tape, squeaking Mickey Mouse type voice, just speed that up and it goes all high pitched. That's how it can sometimes come through. So we need to work with them to, again, slow that down to what we can hear. Now, whilst that process is taking place, because their minds work much, much faster, they will also be getting images in their mind, remembrances, memories, experiences of different kind. So this can sometimes come as a kind of jumble bag of thoughts, emotions, sounds, feelings, smells, tastes, whatever may be relevant to that person who is trying to communicate something of their lives and trying to give a hint of who they are, and it can come as a huge, big jumble. So whilst if that person is very experienced and we're talking about pure clairaudience, that is the simplest, I think the most accurate way of working. Again, it's just repeating what's been given. It isn't as simple as that. So you've got this jumble of memories, actions, reactions, smells, tastes, timelines from when they passed, sometimes the condition of or the atmosphere of, for example, a place in the 1960s. They're trying to give that information. And especially if they're not 100% au fait with the process, they may have communicated a couple of times. Again, there can be this complete jumble of information given. So what a medium needs to do is to understand this jumble as it comes through, get the person to elucidate a little better. Now, one of the jobs of the guide that works with you when you're working, is to instruct the newcomer or the communicator in, for example, how I work. So everybody's got this little library inside their head. You can call it a library of associations, and so certain things will mean certain things to us. And the way that you can familiarize yourself with that is the psychiatrist's kind of examination of maybe just dropping ink on the paper and say, what does that remind you of? So that's quite a good example. So our minds associate things in different ways. Some of it, certainly to us, is completely logical. To other people, it's not logical at all. So our minds all work differently. And what we do as we begin to develop is we start to recognize a little more clearly that association that we have. And again, sometimes the associations for ourselves are quite odd. And an example's being given to me here, which is very strange, makes common sense to me, hopefully to you. And what my guide is talking about is some bird seed. And he's literally holding some in his hand. And as I'm looking at it, I'm looking at birdseed, but it's immediately taken me back to my dad, who used to have an aviary. And so it takes me back along a timeline to a specific point in time, memories of my dad, memories of the birds we lost one winter when they all died. We lost about 50 birds. So the very fact that I can be shown birdseed and it immediately takes me back to that time. I don't think birdseed would probably mean anything to 80-90% of people. It wouldn't have such a specific impact. So something as curious as that, completely logical to me. And if you say to most people, and you can try this, you know, say, look, you know, I'm just going to give you an image, birdseed, what does that mean to you? Most people, I think, would say, well, feeding the birds. It's not the same connection. What they're doing is making logical birdseed is for birds. What else do you do with it? When you start to train to become a medium, something as simple as birdseed can have a whole plethora, a whole huge amount of different connotations. So our guides start to work in that way with us. They know our minds intimately. And we build up, we expand this library, and then when a communicator comes forward, what our guide does is instruct them on how our mind works, what associations we make, however illogical to that communicator. Because again, using the birdseed thing, if you said to him birdseed, he would probably say, yeah, it's food for the birds, what of it? But what our guide would say is instruct them and say, well, look, if you want to go back to a particular memory and time of Leo's dad and the time Avery birds were lost, show him birdseed. So the communicator, in wanting to perhaps communicate to somebody I'm reading for, a similar thing, or perhaps when birds were lost or there was a harsh winter and lots of birds died in that area, what my guide would do is instruct this gentleman to show me birdseed. I would make that instant connection with that time, and the way that would translate is I may say, this gentleman showing me birdseed, or if I'm slightly more advanced, I would say, he's showing me birdseed, but this makes me think of my dad. In particular winter, he owned an aviary, and, you know, there was this, complete disaster for the birds, but this mini disaster. And that would be a very, very personal message to the person that I'm reading for. So we go from my logicalizing, if that's the right word in mediumship, birdseed, that's particular incident, memories of my dad, what my dad was like, what I was like at that time, family circumstances, all those kinds of feelings would be drawn in because the communicator has been instructed by the guide, if you show him this is the train of thought that Leo will have. And from that simple image of birdseed, I could say to the person I'm reading for, this has taken me back, this is the situation. But as I'm talking, the communicator would add little things. So I've often said, even when I'm talking to you, I'm asking dozens of questions. So they may show me that, and I'm saying, I'm being taken to this, birdseed. As I'm thinking of my dad, the communicator would also say, Dad, yes, that's right. So I would say, well, this is connected to birds, but I'm actually being drawn towards your dad. He seems to be a lover of birds because I've got that connection with my dad and he had with birds. And hopefully they would say, yes, that's right. The communicator then may give me memories of what the childhood was like, what was going on in the house at a particular time. And again, let's take space of maybe a decade, and he would take me to perhaps a particular year, because I'm firing off these questions, and then that particular year, a particular incident, and maybe how that turned out. So as I'm talking to the person saying, you know, I'm getting this connection with your dad who loved birds, and I'm getting this other information which is filtered through, which is talking about a particular incident in a particular year and maybe the outcome. And because my attention is being drawn to that year, incident and outcome, there are no coincidences in spirit communication. So I know as my attention is being drawn to those particular aspects, those are things I'm supposed to be mentioning. Now, again, it depends on your development. I could mention them as in passing and just say, well, I'm just being given this information. Or as I'm thinking of it and the communicator's adding more and more and more to that particular strand, I could get very detailed information of those particular things. So there would be an essence of that which is very easily, or should hopefully be very easily, identifiable by the person that's being given the reading. So the whole thing's it's a little bit like a map, and areas are flashed up, highways, roads are flashed up, part of the scenery is flashed up, whether there are lakes or whether there are trees or innumerable things. You know, that as in England, there are certain places it's growing now where there are red squirrel. Most of it was grey squirrel. It all used to be red squirrel until the grey was introduced. So the fact that that may happen may draw me to a certain part of the country where red squirrels are now starting to proliferate. That would give me an area. That may also give me a time. So the whole thing is very, very fluid. It acts very, very fast. So whilst the communicator may be physically talking to me and giving me some information, there are memories that he wants to get across for the person being read for. And my guide is communicating with them saying, well, look, you know, if you do this, this will hit the nail on the head. This will bring up this kind of reaction within Leo's mind. He will remember this, that, and that. What is it you want to emphasize? And the communicator will say, well, actually, it's this bit and that bit and that bit. And he'll say, yeah, that's fine. If you bring up this connection and that connection and that connection, it's like drawing a whole set of dots, a whole series of dots. And what happens then is this very fluid thing, which may at some points become fairly indistinct and illogical, start to have a pattern and a sense that falls into place. So again, you know, we've got the very simplistic thing of birdseed, which could mean anything to anyone, having specific meanings, and the whole thing suddenly expanding. One of the things that I tell my students, and I have mentioned on air quite a few times as well, is that you may get a couple of sounds, maybe you may get 3 or 4 different pictures, and they will have very quick bang, 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 4 pictures. You can get an hour's reading out of that. And the reason you can get an hour's reading out of that is the explanation that I have given, because one thing leads to another. Lots of details start to get filled in. So I suppose if you imagine it as a pixelated picture, something that, you know, is quite blurred, you're looking at it from a distance, or maybe you're far too close to it and you have to move back, and all of a sudden the pixels, as they get smaller, you can suddenly see the picture, whether it's a tree, a face, or whatever it is. And that's the way that the communication gets built up. So it's interesting from a development point of view to find that you're given one specific little thing, birdseed, and it expands into maybe 20 years worth of experiences for that person, up to date, a minutiae of information and detail, and highlighting things that are happening for that person, possible outcomes, solutions, and as I work myself, as you well know, punctuated intensely with confirmations, because for me that's the way it works. I wouldn't want to work any other way. there's no point for me in just going on. And I've kind of heard this with people from the platform, unfortunately, but in the way they work privately as well. A whole tirade of information in which the person being read for hardly gets a word in edgeways. They tend not to remember it either. They'll latch onto one or two bits here and there that may or may not make sense, and they're not hearing the rest of it. So one of the reasons that I work the way that I work, which for me is very successful and quite obviously successful for the recipient as well, is that you're given information. There's a lot of information given in whatever it might be, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, but it's punctuated with confirmations that most of the time the recipient can identify, so it's making sense. And the way that we work like that is because what it shows is there's a little bit of information there. I need you to try and remember it. And the reason I want you to remember it is because it's going to be useful for you, but I'm also going to give you a confirmation, and that links those two things together for that person. So while there's a lot of information given in whatever time we have, it's much shorter on radio. Obviously, we tend to keep to 5 minutes or so, which is what we wouldn't normally do that. So it's information that's given, punctuated by confirmation, so that links together those things in the person's mind. They can understand it from that perspective. Now, quite conversely, and without wishing to confuse, quite often there's information given which makes absolutely no sense to anyone. And if you can look up on Yale.com, there's a gentleman there that I gave some information for. He gave me a lovely review, bless him. And apparently I highlighted, I think it was a grandfather. If I'm confusing a couple of reviews, I do apologise. But I highlighted a grandfather, gave a description. This gentleman didn't understand the description at all. I went on further, apparently, during that reading to state that his family come from Hungary. Now, this gentleman had no accent. Because it would otherwise, I'm very bad with accents anyway, but that would have kind of given me a lead in. And the gentleman was quite impressed by the fact that he speaks English, doesn't seem to have any kind of foreign accent at all, and the information was given that his family come from Hungary. He went back, asked about it, found out that the description that I'd given was apparently spot on. So conversely, it's nice to get information that kind of makes sense, and then confirmation, you go, I've got that. And what I tend to say is if the confirmation is correct and you understand it, then it makes what was given just prior to that, it is showing that that's correct. Now, that's a good way to work, information, confirmation, because it not only lets me know that I'm still hitting the mark, I've still got the connection, because it can drop, things can go wrong. It's not a perfect science by any means, but there is that continuation there. And so people remember, they link those two things up and they begin to understand. So the dots for them are joining also. What sometimes sticks in people's minds is that they don't recognise a person, they don't recognise a particular set of circumstances. It may be with their children that the grown-up children have not told them of something going on, and they don't understand the confirmation either. That part doesn't make sense. And what they do is they'll go back, if they've got any sense, and most people do,